If you are used to the silence of solitude, what will you do when a stormy night puts you before a life or death choice? Are you curious about what lies behind that thunder? Join me in exploring, my friend, to uncover the mystery of this story. My name is Elias Hawthorne, and for 12 years I've carved out a life alone on this patch of Texas dirt, where the wind howls louder than any human voice ever could. This ranch, my sanctuary, my prison, sits miles from the nearest town, a speck on the map where no one comes unless they're lost or desperate. I've made it that way. The world out there, it's a mess of lies, betrayal, and pain. I learned that the hard way, long before I built these walls of wood and solitude. But tonight, God help me, tonight, something broke through. A storm, fiercer than any I've seen in years, tore across the plains, and with it came a girl. A girl who knelt at my gate, soaked to the bone, and shattered the quiet I'd spent over a decade perfecting. If you're pumped for a tale of bravery and betrayal, give us a like. Comment Texas to join the ride, and watch till the end for a twist that'll leave you speechless. The rain started just after dusk. It didn't creep in soft like most storms do. No, this one came down like the wrath of God himself, pounding the earth, turning the dirt road that snakes past my ranch into a river of mud. I stood on my porch, boots planted firm, my old oilskin coat flapping against my thighs as the wind screamed. Lightning cracked the sky open, jagged white scars that lit up the endless stretch of prairie. I've always liked storms. They don't ask questions, they don't judge, they just are, wild, untamed, like the part of me I buried long ago. But tonight, the storm wasn't just noise and fury. It brought something else, something I didn't expect, didn't want, didn't need. I saw her first as a shadow, a flicker in the corner of my eye. The rain was falling so hard it blurred everything, like looking through a window smeared with grease. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, some stray branch caught in the wind. But then she moved, a figure, small, stumbling through the downpour, barely holding herself upright against the gusts. I squinted, my hand tightening on the porch railing. Nobody comes out here. Nobody. Not the mail carrier, not the cattle buyers, not even the damn tax man. This land is mine, bought with sweat and scars, and I've made damn sure the world knows to stay away. But there she was, this girl, collapsing to her knees right at the edge of my gate, her body folding like a broken doll. My heart kicked hard in my chest, a jolt I hadn't felt in years. I wanted to turn away, to go back inside, bolt the door, and let the storm swallow whatever trouble she was dragging with her. That's what 12 years of being alone teaches you. People bring chaos. People bring pain. People leave. I learned that lesson when I was younger, when love was a word I still believed in, before it burned me raw and left me hollow. I built this life to keep the world out, to keep myself safe, but something about her stopped me cold. The way she knelt there, not moving, not crying out, just surrendering to the rain. It wasn't weakness. It was something deeper, something that clawed at the part of me I'd locked away. She was broken, and I knew broken when I saw it. The wind howled, flinging sheets of rain across my face, stinging my eyes. I stood there frozen, watching her through the deluge. Her dress clung to her like a second skin, thin and tattered, no match for the cold. Her hair, dark as the storm clouds above, hung in wet strands across her face, hiding her eyes. But I could see her shoulders shaking, not from the chill, but from something raw, something that cut deeper than the Texas wind ever could. I cursed under my breath, my voice swallowed by the thunder. "Damn it, Elias," I muttered. "Don't do this. Don't get involved." But my feet were already moving, boots splashing through the puddles pooling on the porch steps. I grabbed my rifle from its hook by the door. Not to threaten her, no. Years out here had taught me to trust nothing and no one. Caution was my only friend, the one thing that kept me alive when the world tried to chew me up and spit me out. The weight of the gun in my hands steadied me, grounded me as I stepped into the storm. The rain hit me like a fist, soaking through my coat, my shirt, my skin, but I didn't care. I had to know who she was. I had to know why she was here, at the edge of nowhere, kneeling like she'd run out of road and out of hope. The gate was 50 yards from the porch, but it felt like a mile in that downpour. Every step sank into the mud, the earth sucking at my boots like it wanted to hold me back. The closer I got, the clearer she became. Young, too young, maybe 19, 20 at most. Her frame was slight, fragile, like a bird caught in a trap, but there was something in the way she held herself, even on her knees, even trembling, a defiance, a spark that the storm couldn't drown. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes locked onto mine through the darkness, and I swear I felt the air shift. Those eyes, they were wide, desperate, but burning with something fierce, like she was daring the world to try and break her one more time. "Please," she whispered, her voice so faint I barely caught it over the roar of the storm. "I have nowhere else to go." Those words hit me like a bullet. I'd heard them before, a lifetime ago, from a different voice, a different girl. That time it ended in heartbreak, in betrayal, in the kind of pain that drives a man to live alone for 12 years. I should have turned her away. I should have told her to keep running, to find some other fool to drag into her mess. But standing there, rain streaming down my face, staring into those eyes that held too much hurt for someone so young, I felt something crack inside me. A wall I'd built, brick by brick, was starting to crumble. "Don't go anywhere. This is about to get intense, and you won't want to miss what happens next." I unlatched the gate, my hands shaking, not from the cold, but from the weight of what I was about to do. I was letting her in, into my home, into my life, into the quiet I'd fought so hard to keep. And I knew, deep in my gut, that whatever she was running from, it wasn't far behind. Trouble always follows people like her, like a shadow you can't outrun. But as she tried to stand, her legs buckled, and she fell back into the mud with a soft cry. That's when I saw them, the bruises. Dark, angry marks circling her wrists, fresh and raw, like she'd been bound tight with rope. My blood went cold. Someone had hurt her, someone she trusted, someone who was supposed to protect her. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice low, steady, like I was calming a spooked horse. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though her whole body trembled as she struggled to her feet. I noticed the way she favored her right leg, the way her dress clung to her, stained dark at the hem. Blood. Not much, but enough to tell me she'd been through hell before she ever reached my gate. I didn't ask questions, not yet. The way she flinched when I stepped closer told me more than words ever could. She'd been hurt, bad, and whoever did it wasn't the kind of man to let her go easy. "Come on," I said, turning toward the cabin. "Let's get you out of this storm." She followed, slow, her steps uneven, like every move cost her something. I kept my distance, rifle still in hand, not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't trust the world she'd come from. The world that was probably already on its way here, riding hard through the rain. My cabin loomed ahead, a squat, sturdy thing built to withstand storms and time and maybe even the kind of trouble she was bringing. But as I pushed open the door, letting her step into the dim glow of my lantern-lit home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just opened the door to something bigger, something dangerous, something that would change everything. Inside, the air was warm, thick with the smell of wood smoke and coffee. The cabin was sparse, clean, but bare. A single bed in the corner, a fireplace that hadn't been lit in days, shelves lined with books I'd read until the pages yellowed. It was a place built for one, because one was all I ever needed. Until now. She stood there, dripping water onto my floor, her eyes darting around like she was mapping every exit, every corner. I didn't blame her. A girl like that, running from God knows what, had to stay sharp. "Name's Elias," I said, setting the rifle down but keeping it close. "What's yours?" "Clara," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Clara Vance." I nodded, studying her. Up close, she looked worse than I'd thought. Her face was pale, gaunt, like she hadn't eaten in days. Her lips were cracked, her cheeks smudged with dirt and maybe tears. But those eyes, they didn't waver. They held a hardness, a strength that didn't belong on someone so young, someone who'd been through what she had. "What are you running from, Clara?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought she wouldn't answer. She pulled her sleeves down, trying to hide the bruises, but I'd already seen them. "Does it matter?" she said finally, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I just need a place to rest, one night. Then I'll be gone." I didn't believe her. Not about the one-night part. whatever she was running from. It wasn't the kind of thing you shake off by morning, but I didn't press her, not yet. The storm outside raged on, the wind rattling the windows, and I knew we didn't have much time before whatever she was running from caught up. I'd been alone too long to miss the signs. Trouble was coming, and it was coming fast. "Sit," I said, pointing to the chair by the fire. "I'll heat something up. You look like you haven't eaten in a week." She hesitated, then sank into the chair, her body folding like it was grateful for the chance to rest. I turned to the stove, my mind racing. 12 years. 12 years of keeping the world at arm's length, of building a life where nothing and no one could touch me. And now, here I was, with a half-drowned girl in my cabin, her secrets heavy as the rain outside. I didn't know what she was running from, but I knew one thing for sure. My quiet days were over, and deep down, in a place I hadn't let myself feel in years, I wasn't sure if I was scared or alive for the first time in a long, long time. The storm didn't let up. If anything, it got worse, the thunder rolling so close it shook the walls. I stirred the pot of stew I'd made a couple days back, the smell filling the cabin, grounding me in the routine of survival. But my eyes kept drifting to Clara, to the way she sat, tense, like a deer ready to bolt. She wasn't just running from something, she was carrying it with her, a weight I could feel from across the room. And as I stood there, the rain hammering the roof, I realized something that scared me more than any storm ever could. I wasn't going to let her face it alone. The storm was still raging outside, the wind rattling the windows of my cabin like it wanted to tear the place apart. Clara Vance stood just inside the doorway, dripping wet, a puddle forming at her feet on the worn wooden floor. She looked like a ghost, her thin frame swallowed by the soaked, tattered dress that clung to her like despair itself. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, hiding most of it, but those eyes, God, those eyes. They burned through the dim light of my lantern, wide and haunted, but with a fire in them that told me she wasn't as broken as she looked. Not yet. I'd seen that look before, a lifetime ago, in someone else who came to me begging for help. That memory stung, sharp and bitter, but I pushed it down. This wasn't then. This was now. "Sit," I said, my voice gruffer than I meant, pointing to the chair by the cold fireplace. I didn't know what else to do with her. She hesitated, her body tense, like she was waiting for me to change my mind and throw her back into the storm. When she finally moved, her steps were slow, careful, like every inch forward was a battle. She sank into the chair, her hands gripping the arms so tight her knuckles turned white. I could see the effort it took for her to sit there, to trust a stranger like me, even for a moment. I didn't blame her. Trust gets you hurt. I learned that lesson 12 years ago, and from the look of her, she'd learned it too. I busied myself at the stove, stirring a pot of leftover stew, the smell of beef and onions filling the cabin. It was something to do, something to keep my hands moving while my mind raced. Who was she? What was she running from? Those bruises on her wrists, dark, ugly marks like someone had tied her up and hadn't been gentle about it, told me enough to make my stomach twist. Someone had hurt her, bad. Someone she'd trusted enough to get close. The thought made my blood heat, a slow burn of anger I hadn't felt in years. I'd spent a long time burying that kind of rage, but it was still there, simmering under the surface, waiting for a reason to rise. "What's your story, Clara?" I asked, keeping my back to her as I stirred the pot. I didn't want to scare her, didn't want her to feel cornered. She was already skittish, her eyes darting to the door every few seconds like she expected it to burst open. I knew that look. I'd seen it in the mirror once, back when the world still had a hold on me. Her voice, when it came, was soft but steady, like she was forcing herself to sound stronger than she felt. "Does it matter?" she said. "I just need a place to stay. One night. I'll be gone by morning." I turned, leaning against the counter, studying her. She'd pulled her sleeves down over her wrists, trying to hide the bruises, but I'd already seen them. They weren't old, faded marks. They were fresh, raw, the kind that told a story of violence that hadn't stopped until she'd run. "It matters," I said, keeping my tone even. "Those marks on your wrists, the way you keep looking at the door like you're waiting for the devil himself to walk through it. You're running from something, or someone." Her jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought she'd bolt right then and there, but she stayed put, her hands clenching tighter on the chair. "Maybe I just got lost," she said, but there was no conviction in it. She wasn't fooling me, and she knew it. Maybe, I said, crossing my arms. Or maybe someone's looking for you, someone who won't be happy to find you here. The words hung between us, heavy as the storm outside. The rain pounded the roof, a steady drumbeat that matched the pulse in my temples. Clara's eyes flicked to the window, then back to me. "I won't bring trouble to your door," she said finally, her voice low but firm. "I just need somewhere to rest, that's all." I didn't believe her, not about the no trouble part. Trouble was already here, I could feel it like the static in the air before a lightning strike. But there was something about her, something in the way she held herself, like she was fighting to keep from falling apart, that made me want to help her. I'd spent 12 years keeping the world out, but this girl, this stranger, had slipped past my defenses, and I wasn't sure why. "You hungry?" I asked, changing the subject. The question seemed to catch her off guard, her eyes widening slightly. "Yes," she said, her voice softer now, like the fight was draining out of her. I nodded, turning back to the stove. "I'll heat up some stew. There's a basin behind that curtain." I jerked my head toward the corner of the cabin. "Clean clothes in the chest. They'll be big, but they're dry." She didn't move at first, just sat there, staring at the floor like she was trying to piece herself back together. Then slowly she stood and limped toward the curtain, her right leg dragging slightly. I noticed the blood again, that dark stain at the hem of her dress, and my gut twisted tighter. She wasn't just running from someone, she was running from hell. As she disappeared behind the curtain, I stirred the stew, my mind spinning. Helping her was a risk, I knew that. 12 years of solitude had taught me to steer clear of other people's problems. But those bruises, that flinch when I'd gotten too close, they weren't just signs of trouble. They were signs of someone who'd been betrayed by the one person who should have protected her. I'd been there, not in the same way, but close enough to know what it felt like to have your trust shattered. And damn it, I couldn't turn her away. When she came back, wearing one of my old flannel shirts and a pair of pants rolled up at the ankles, she looked even younger, vulnerable, like a kid playing dress-up in her father's clothes. But her eyes still had that fire, that defiance, and it hit me hard. She wasn't just a victim. She was a fighter, even if she didn't know it yet. I set a bowl of stew in front of her, the steam curling up between us. "Eat," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee and sitting across from her. She took a tentative sip, then another, and soon she was devouring it like she hadn't eaten in days. I watched her, the silence between us filled only by the storm outside and the clink of her spoon against the bowl. "How long you been running?" I asked, keeping my voice low, not wanting to push too hard. She paused, the spoon halfway to her mouth. "Long enough," she said, her voice tight. "His name's Gideon Blackwood. My husband." The word hit me like a punch. Husband. Not just some thug she'd crossed paths with. This was personal, legal, the kind of trouble that didn't just disappear. In the eyes of the law, she was his property, and helping her could make me an outlaw in my own right. But as I looked at her, at the bruises she couldn't hide, at the way her hands shook even as she tried to hold herself together, I realized something that scared me more than the law ever could. I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her go back to him. Not now, not ever. The stew was gone in minutes, Clara scraping the bowl like it was the first real meal she'd had in God knows how long. I sat across from her, nursing my coffee, the bitter taste grounding me as the storm outside kept up its assault on the cabin. The air inside was warm, but heavy, like the weight of her secrets was pressing down on us both. She'd told me his name, Gideon Blackwood, her husband, and that one word had shifted everything. This wasn't just about a girl on the run. This was about a man who thought he owned her, who'd left those marks on her wrists, who'd driven her to my gate in the middle of a Texas downpour. And I knew, deep in my bones, he was coming for her. Clara kept glancing at the window, her eyes sharp, like she could see through the rain to whatever was out there. I didn't need to ask to know she was scared. Not of me, not anymore, but of him. Gideon. The name alone made my skin crawl, conjuring images of a man who'd use his fists to keep what he thought was his. I'd met men like that before, back when I was younger, wilder, before I'd sworn off the world. They were all the same, cowards hiding behind power, money, or a name that meant something in a town like this. "You know him," she said suddenly, not a question but a statement, her voice low and edged with fear. "You know who he is." I stood, moving to the window, peering out into the darkness. The rain was still coming down hard, but I could see something else now. Torches, faint but unmistakable, flickering through the trees like ghosts. "I know enough," I said, my voice steady despite the chill creeping up my spine. "The Blackwoods own half this county. Rich, powerful, and mean as snakes when crossed. You should have told me who he was." Her face went pale, her hands clutching the edge of the table. "Would it have changed anything?" she asked, and there was a challenge in her voice, like she was testing me, seeing if I'd throw her out now that I knew the stakes. I turned back to her, meeting those fierce eyes. "No," I said, "but it would have given me a head start on what's coming." And it was coming. The torches were closer now, a dozen maybe, cutting through the rain like a pack of wolves on the hunt. I grabbed my rifle from the wall, the familiar weight of it calming the storm inside me. "Get away from the window," I told Clara, my voice low but urgent. She moved fast, pressing herself against the far wall, her face white with terror. "He brought his brothers," she whispered, her voice trembling now, "and probably hired men from town." I counted the lights through the window, my heart steady but heavy. She was right. This wasn't just one angry husband. This was a small army, and they weren't here to talk. I pulled up a loose floorboard in the kitchen, revealing the root cellar below. "Get down there," I said, keeping my eyes on the approaching torches. "And don't make a sound, no matter what you hear." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "He'll kill you," she said, her voice cracking. "Gideon doesn't negotiate." I looked down at her hand, then met her eyes. "Neither do I." The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, the ground shaking as the riders closed in. I replaced the floorboard, hiding Clara below, and positioned myself by the door, rifle ready. Through the window I could see them now, a semicircle of men, their torches casting long shadows in the rain. A voice boomed through the storm, sharp and arrogant. "Hawthorne, we know she's in there!" I opened the door slowly, keeping the rifle visible but not aimed. The man in front was young, maybe 25, with a face too soft for the cruelty in his eyes. Gideon Blackwood. I'd never met him, but I knew his kind. Spoiled, entitled, the kind of man who thought the world owed him everything, including his wife. "Gideon Blackwood, I presume," I said, my voice calm, like we were discussing the weather. "That's right," he said, nudging his horse closer, water dripping from his hat. "And you're harboring my wife. Hand her over, and we'll pretend this never happened." I glanced at the other riders. Some Blackwood family, their faces mirroring Gideon's, others hired guns, the kind who'd kill for a handful of coins. "Don't see any wife here," I said, keeping my tone even. "Just me and the storm." Gideon's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. "Don't play games, old man. That horse tied behind your barn, that's mine. Those tracks leading to your door, those are her boots." I cursed myself silently. I'd missed the tracks. 12 years of isolation had made me sloppy, careless. "Maybe someone borrowed your horse," I said, shrugging. "Happens all the time out here." One of the hired guns laughed, a sharp bark that cut through the rain. "He's got spine, I'll give him that." Gideon raised a hand for silence, his face darkening. "One more time, Hawthorne. Where's my wife?" I held his gaze, the rifle steady in my hands. "Your wife ran from you for a reason, and looking at you, I'm starting to see why." The insult landed like a spark in dry grass. The riders shifted, hands moving toward their guns, but Gideon didn't flinch. He smiled, cold and calculating. "You're making a mistake," he said. "My family owns this county. The sheriff, the judge, half the businesses in town. You think anyone's going to believe you over me?" "I don't need anyone to believe me," I said, my voice low, dangerous. "I just need to make sure you never touch her again." That's when Gideon pulled his gun. He was fast, but I was faster. 12 years hadn't dulled my reflexes as much as I'd feared. My rifle barked once, and Gideon stumbled back, clutching his shoulder, blood mixing with the rain. Chaos erupted. Horses reared, men shouted, bullets splintered the porch around me. I dove behind the railing, my heart pounding, but then I heard something that stopped me cold. Clara's scream from inside the cabin. Someone had found the cellar. The scream cut through the gunfire, sharp and raw, like a knife in my chest. Clara. They'd found her. I rolled toward the cabin door as bullets whined overhead, splintering the wood around me. Through the doorway, I saw one of Gideon's brothers, a younger version of him, with the same cruel eyes, dragging Clara up from the cellar, his hand clamped over her mouth. She was fighting, kicking, but he was stronger. pulling her toward the door like she was nothing more than a prize to be claimed. "Got her!" he yelled to the others, his voice smug, triumphant. I had seconds to act. Outside, Gideon was barking orders through gritted teeth, his shoulder bleeding but his rage untouched. "Kill him! Kill the old fool!" But the hired guns hesitated. Killing a man for harboring a runaway wife was one thing. Murdering him in cold blood while he protected a woman was another. Even men like them had limits, and I saw it in their eyes. Doubt, maybe even shame. I used that moment, bursting through the doorway and tackling the brother holding Clara. We crashed into the kitchen table, dishes shattering as we hit the floor. He was young, strong, but I'd spent 12 years wrestling cattle and chopping wood. I drove my fist into his temple, and he went limp, his grip on Clara falling away. "You hurt?" I asked her, my voice rough, urgent. She shook her head, her eyes wide with terror. "He found the entrance while you were talking. I tried to stay quiet, but—" "Not your fault," I said, grabbing ammunition from the gun cabinet. "Can you shoot?" "My father taught me," she said, her voice steadier now, like she was finding her strength again. I handed her a pistol, the weight of it solid in her hands. "Good, because this isn't over." Outside, Gideon's voice turned desperate, his wounds slowing him but not stopping him. "Burn him out! Burn the whole place down!" I glanced through the window. 2 of the hired guns were dismounting, torches in hand. The rain was easing, which meant the fire might catch. "Back door," I said, grabbing Clara's arm. "There's a path through the woods to the creek. Follow it downstream to the old bridge." "I'm not leaving you," she said, gripping the pistol tighter. "He'll say you kidnapped me, that you forced yourself on me. Your life will be ruined." She was right. Gideon had the power to twist the truth, to make me the villain in a story no one would question, but staying here was suicide. "Then what?" I asked, my voice sharp. "We fight," she said, her words simple, resolute. The fire started then, flames licking at the cabin's front wall, the wood catching despite the damp. "They're really going to burn us alive," Clara whispered, her voice trembling but her eyes hard. I checked my rifle. 3 shots left. The back window was our only chance, but we'd be exposed if we stayed. "There's something you should know," Clara said suddenly, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Gideon said I killed his baby. He's lying. There was no baby. I couldn't, because of what he did to me. The doctor said the damage was too much." Her words hit harder than any bullet. She'd been through more than I could imagine, and yet here she was, ready to fight. "Clara," I said, my voice soft, "you're not damaged goods. You're the bravest damn person I've ever met." The flames reached the roof, smoke filling the cabin. "Together," I said, kicking out the back window. "Stay low." We dropped into the mud behind the cabin, the fire crackling above us. The hired guns were focused on the front, leaving the back unguarded. Arrogance. They thought we'd beg, not fight. "The barn," I whispered, pointing to the structure 50 yards away. "Better cover. My horse is there." We crawled through the mud, the storm and darkness hiding us. The cabin roof burst into flames behind us, lighting the night like a pyre. "There!" one of the riders shouted, spotting us. Bullets kicked up dirt around us as we sprinted for the barn. One grazed my sleeve, another missed Clara by inches, but we made it, diving through the door as lead splintered the frame. Inside, my stallion Shadow snorted nervously. He was old but steady, a partner from my wilder days. "Can you ride?" I asked Clara. "Better than I shoot," she said, a faint smile breaking through her fear. "Good," I said, saddling Shadow with quick hands. "There's a trail through the canyon to the next county. If we can reach it." The barn door exploded inward, 3 hired guns rushing in, guns blazing. I dove behind a hay bale, returning fire. One went down, screaming. Clara's pistol barked twice, clean shots, and the other 2 crumpled to the floor. I stared at her, stunned. "Your father taught you well," I said. "Had to," she said, her hands shaking as she reloaded. "A woman needs to protect herself." Outside, Gideon was screaming now, his voice wild. "Burn the barn! Don't let them escape!" But his men were wavering. "I'm not dying for your wife troubles," one called out. "We're done." Horses galloped away, leaving only Gideon and his brothers. I peered through a crack in the barn wall. 3 men left, the most dangerous ones. Family. They wouldn't quit. "We can run," Clara said. "Take Shadow and head for the canyon." But running meant Gideon would follow, today or tomorrow. "No more running," I said. "This ends tonight." The barn smelled of hay and horse, a sharp contrast to the smoke and blood outside. The cabin was gone, a roaring inferno in the night, but we were alive. Clara stood beside me, her pistol steady in her hands, her eyes no longer just scared but fierce, like she'd found something inside herself she didn't know she had. 3 men remained. Gideon and his 2 brothers crouched behind an overturned wagon, their torches flickering in the dying storm. They were family, bound by blood and cruelty, and they wouldn't stop until Clara was theirs or we were dead. I stepped out of the barn, rifle ready, the firelight casting long shadows across the mud. "Gideon!" I called, my voice cutting through the crackle of the flames. "Just you and me. Leave your brothers out of it." "You shot me, you old fool," he shouted back, his wounded arm hanging limp. "You think I'll give you a fair fight?" "I think you're a coward who hides behind money and men," I said, the word sharp, meant to sting. It worked. Gideon stood, his face twisted with rage, his good hand gripping his gun. "I'm going to kill you slow," he snarled. "Make you watch while I drag her home. Teach her what happens to wives who run." Clara stepped out beside me, her pistol steady. "I'm done being afraid of you," she said, her voice quiet but unbreakable. The fight came fast, like lightning splitting the sky. Gideon raised his gun, his brothers flanking him, but 12 years hadn't dulled my aim. My rifle spoke first, dropping the brother on the left. Clara's pistol cracked twice, the second brother clutching his chest as he fell. That left Gideon, alone, his gun wavering in his offhand, blood dripping from his shoulder. "It's over," I said, my rifle trained on him. "Your men are gone. Your brothers are down. Walk away." "She's my wife," he screamed, his face contorted with rage. "She belongs to me." "I don't belong to anyone," Clara said, stepping forward. "Not anymore." She fired once, clean and final. Gideon Blackwood crumpled into the mud, his threats dying with him. For a long moment we stood there, the rain slowing to a drizzle, the cabin's flames the only sound besides distant thunder. "Is it really over?" Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. I looked around. 3 dead men, a burned cabin, my life in ashes. But standing there with Clara beside me, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in 12 years. "It's over," I said. We buried the bodies at dawn, no words spoken over their graves. They'd made their choices, and we'd made ours. The cabin was a total loss, but the barn and Shadow survived, along with most of my livestock. Insurance would cover some of the damage, but rebuilding would take time. Clara and I prepared to head to town, her sitting behind me on Shadow, her arms around my waist, a quiet strength in her grip. "Where will you go?" I asked, the morning sun breaking through the clouds. She looked at me, those eyes still holding hope despite everything. "I was thinking I'd stay," she said. "Help you rebuild, if you'll have me." I felt something shift in my chest, a warmth I hadn't known in years. "I'm not easy to live with," I said. "Set in my ways. Suspicious of people." "Good thing I'm not people," she said, a smile breaking through, like sunlight after a long night. "I'm just Clara." "Just Clara," I repeated, and for the first time in over a decade, I smiled back. 2 months later, the new cabin was finished. Bigger, with 2 bedrooms and a proper kitchen. Clara insisted on the extra space, saying you never know when guests might come. I'd learned to trust her instincts. She kept her maiden name, Vance, wanting no tie to her past. The town whispered about our quick marriage, but the sheriff ruled the shootout self-defense, and the Blackwoods' reputation for cruelty made most folks side with us. On quiet evenings, we'd sit on the new porch, watching the sunset paint the plains gold. Sometimes I'd catch Clara staring into the distance, and I'd wonder what she saw. "What are you thinking about?" I'd ask. "Nothing important," she'd say, her smile soft but real. "Just grateful for storms." Her laugh would carry across the plains, a sound like a promise that some things, once lost, could be found again. Wow, what a ride. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and check out the next video for another story that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.